Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Crypto Philanthropy, where we highlight the top giving news, stories, and the power of crypto for good. I'm your host, Nick Mikhalevsky, Senior Sales Manager here at The Giving Block, and as always, joined by my colleague, Pietro Moran, Director of Crypto at Shift4, our parent company. Pietro, how's it going?
Doing good, Nick. It's great to be back. Episode 14. A good week in the books. I mean, we say that every week, right? But feels like we've gotten a consistent flutter of good news. Can't wait to share it with everybody. And honestly, things are moving and grooving. End of summer's in sight, so hope everybody's enjoyed their vacations. But a lot of good stuff coming up for the fall.
So today we'll jump right in. A few things that we're going to cover. The crypto price check, as always, going to go through our donation stats from just the past week. There's a ton of stuff to talk about there. And of course, we'll wrap up with top industry news for the larger crypto industry in general. So, Pietro, I know markets seemed like they're kind of moving sort of a little bit choppy, a little bit sideways. What's kind of been happening since we last run the podcast?
Yeah, so I mean, you described it perfectly well. I mean, on a week-to-week basis, right? We're not in an environment where we're probably seeing anything too crazy from a price perspective. So this week, it's better news than last week. Bitcoin's almost at $61,000, Ethereum 2640 ish, Solana right around that 142 mark. All that to say, again, the environment really hasn't changed. We can talk about this a little bit later. There are a couple events on the horizon, and even today, that are pretty interesting to talk about in terms of like Federal Reserve meeting in Jackson Hole. For anybody who follows the macro side of things, we've seen just a general, I would say, sentiment around like some of the political discussions around kind of what each of the candidates wants to do with the economy. Investors are starting to react accordingly. What does it mean for crypto, right? Getting more and more confidence that crypto is going to be an issue on the ballot. There are some single issue crypto voters, but I think both candidates want to make sure that this is an industry that flourishes in the United States, right? And we don't provide investment advice or political advice, obviously, but it's an interesting thing to watch, considering that for the first time ever, we have political candidates in both major parties actually actively talking to the industry and actively seeking to create a regulatory framework that makes sense and is fair to the entrepreneurs that want to build businesses here. So I think people are slowly coming around to that. I think you have all these tailwinds from the ETFs. Folks are still buying crypto. They're still participating in these sort of traditional finance products with the ETFs and all the other ETPs that are traded all over the world. And so, we're kind of just ping ponging around. We've been in like the high 50s, the low 60s. Everybody like thinks we're going to go to all time high, and then it just comes right back down. And then they think it's going to go lower, and then it just comes right back up. So, I would say we're kind of in a position of just, ping ponging in a range and nothing too exciting, but this week better than last week, and we hope to continue that momentum.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting as things go into the fall. I mean, with the September rate cut, do we see 50 basis points? The election. I mean, just think about the last, like where we were 2 years ago. I mean, if you told me 2 years from now we would be in a position like this with crypto in the conversation, the mainstream conversation, not just on the financial side, but in the political spectrum, and even the giving, the giving activity that we've been seeing. I would have totally shocked. I never would have thought that it would be playing out this way. So really, really interesting to see. Can't wait to see what happens in the fall.
100%. I mean, just to add one more note on that, I think what we're seeing as well, if you're, at all following the macroeconomic side of things, we're pretty much pricing in like a guarantee of rate cuts this year, right? And so that M2 money supply, more liquidity injections into the market. What does that mean for risk assets, which crypto is obviously like a risk asset? Probably is a net positive, all things considered, and I guess, to your point, right? We tend to have a short attention span because we're terminally online, but like we're sitting close to all-time highs in, we just spent 2 years, Bitcoin was down under 20K not too long ago, right? I just would say that everybody thinking about this as a total sprint, like it's more an ultra marathon than anything. So, we're here for the long haul, but price isn't going to move 100% in a day necessarily. I don't think we should be expecting that. So I think a lot of people are frustrated because they just want everything to be growing, growing, growing. And, that's a natural thing. But, even whether it's prices or with the philanthropy, like a lot of this stuff is still getting built, and we're slowly inching closer to a more universal kind of market penetration for crypto. With it
Yeah.
being all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, it's a multi-year game, and certainly in the philanthropy space, right? You've got your moments of generosity, but people building up, their philanthropic, motivations over years, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this continues. And with that, I'll kind of shift over to the donation stats, and continues to be just a really strong giving summer. And again, we haven't even gotten into sort of like the prime time where we get into the last months of the year when it makes so much more sense to make those tax smart gifts right at year end. The majority of our listeners in the nonprofit space are prepping for the time of year when the overwhelming majority of donations do come in. So it's really encouraging to see that there's been generosity being spread around even before we get into that year end season. So this week, another six figures coming in just across crypto donations alone, and wanted to just break down a few other bits of information that looked interesting in the data. So it broke it out by assets, regions, and industries. And not unsurprisingly, stablecoins and Bitcoin, top of the list. Continues the trend that we've been seeing. So, if you are a nonprofit out there, definitely recommend keep asking, your supporters if they happen to be in the crypto space, if they've got some appreciated Bitcoin. We talked about how just, not long ago, Bitcoin was trading at, much lower levels, and, the amount of appreciation and the tax optimized giving that people could have could be pretty impactful. Now, certainly we have the US and the UK as our largest markets. But aside from that, it's interesting to see continued pockets showing up in Europe here, and also in the Pacific. The Australian market is probably our third largest. So for anyone listening, in Australia, there's a fantastic cohort of nonprofits that have been doing really, really well. And across Europe, you can see here some orgs in Sweden and in Switzerland also seeing some donations. And then moving down to the industry side of things, really a wide array. I mean, there's a nice spread across giving, that we sometimes get some concentrations in certain industries. And we've highlighted, I think, a couple of really great stories like in the animal welfare space, but a really nice spread of all kinds of different causes that are seeing donations, which is really great to see. But to kind of shift a little bit over to the right side of the screen, the crypto industry has a lot of these like Web3 communities, and we talked about this in some of the earlier episodes, and saw another really great example of a Web3 gaming community that is really prioritizing philanthropy. And as they interact with their community, they want to give back while they do that. And they've highlighted three organizations that they want to support to the tune of $300,000. Something that isn't any small chump change here. And so this community continues to foster and build up a really strong culture of philanthropy, which is also really baked into the sort of the wider ecosystem of crypto in general. So if anybody is kind of new to this too, and are new to this space, keep in mind that, crypto is kind of like a pillar of the crypto community. And if you want some more detail into some of the motivations, how do you build this in your fundraising strategy, how to future-proof your organization, we're going to put a link here to this bottom image. Does your nonprofit know why donors give to charity? The 20 plus reasons there. It's a really great resource that's in our weekly newsletter. It's fantastic. If you haven't subscribed to it already, again, we'll drop a link in the show notes to do that. We go really deep into the dogs community story, a bunch of other great crypto philanthropy stories that are also in there, and some practical tips as well if you are crypto curious and you want to build this into your fundraising strategy. Certainly as we get into year end, which is coming right around the corner. So really awesome to see these stats. Another fantastic week. Can't wait to see what happens over the next 7 days.
Sounds great. I mean, I love hearing these stories. One of the things that I take away, because we sit on different sides of the business. You more on the nonprofit and philanthropic side, me more on the payment processing, kind of servicing our crypto clientele there. One of the reminders just from seeing that, and you know, we always tend to think locally to some extent, right? But crypto is truly a global phenomenon, right? It's great to see a lot of these organizations coming in from other parts of the world, and I think it's a little trickier, right? Because from a payments perspective, like if you want to buy Bitcoin, it doesn't really matter where you are, and the rationale might be a little bit different, but it's mostly along the same kind of logic train. There's a lot of nuance, right, when it comes to the tax advantage status of giving, and that's why the U.S. has probably been the focal point of the Giving Block's efforts, or at least seen the most demand. But it's really cool to see just sort of the organic growth in some of those markets that maybe don't have those. But it's like, donors are just adopting new trends and finding new ways to give is kind of my read on that. But would love to hear your sense of it, because working with nonprofits all over the world is obviously, I think, just a more indicative way of showing that it's just another asset and a way you can give, but it's like you said, future proofing it and thinking towards some of those other generations that are maybe just holding more crypto than they do stocks, or just maybe they want to donate without using a credit card. So, would love to get your take on that before we switch gears.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great kind of, mechanism for donors when you have those, appreciated assets that you can give. You're not dipping into, your disposable income, right? It's that sort of like extra money that's out there. And when you combine it with, really tax advantaged accounts like donor advised funds and things like that, you can kind of really set yourself up to, donate to all those causes that are near and dear to your heart. And one of the great things about what we have sort of at the Giving Block, and even just googling the Giving Block, finding our main page, seeing all the different charities in our donor marketplace, that's where a lot of this discovery happens, where people like a particular cause, they like supporting a specific type of organization. There's a lot of discovery that happens on that page. So it's a great way to highlight yourself for donors outside of your current traditional local support network. For example, I was talking to an organization that had started to see some new donations. They're sort of like a like summer camp type of space, and started to be able to tap into donors that just had a great experience at camp, right? And I'm someone that had a great experience at camp, and I've donated to those organizations in the past. And it doesn't matter if it's a local one here or it's across the country. I just like being able to support programs that are doing things like that. So yeah, such a cool tool for giving. That's why I would love coming to work every day.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So Pietro, on shifting now to, I guess, like one level up, in sort of the wider crypto industry, what's been happening? What are some of the big developments in the news?
Yeah, so right. I mean, didn't do this intentionally, I promise. But on the topic or theme of international expansion opportunities and news, we have one news item from the U.S. and two from outside the U.S. So that kind of perfectly hits the nail on the head for me. So the first news item I want to talk about is that Binance is restarting some of their services in India. I think they were on a 7-month regulatory pause slash hiatus. And that's not atypical for those listening in, that folks in the crypto industry are working with local regulators, trying to figure out and adapt to ever changing regulatory environments. And so it's interesting to see that some of their products and services will begin, reactivating in that region. I mean, India is a massive market, not just from a population standpoint, but also from like a crypto aptitude and savviness standpoint. We've seen a lot of, developments out of India on the regulatory front. And I remember even 2017, 2018, it was a big topic there. It seems like they're finding common ground with the entrepreneurs that want to build, and also finding common ground with the sort of international expansion of businesses that maybe aren't based in India, but still need to apply or abide by local regulatory standards. So, Binance is the largest crypto exchange in the world. So, when they're making a push into a region, it tends to be indicative of some form of, I would say, adoption and or regulatory clarity. So, that's a really interesting point to me. I just think it's notable, considering you have so much, you have so many of, I would say, like the right ingredients for crypto adoption, right? You have a very like technically savvy population. You have a lot of distribution of like mobile phones and places where people might hold a wallet or be able to interact with the crypto and Web3 ecosystems, right? And then I think you also have just a general eagerness to learn in the region. And so I think that's obviously, proving out in the fact that a business would find it economically advantageous to go to India. Obviously, that's one thing. But then to see them also have kind of the green flag from regulators is kind of further support to that. So that's the first news item. The second comes out of South Korea, and this one's a little wonky, a little bit more on the investing side. But so the South Korean National Pension Fund announced in one of their quarterly reportings that they purchased $33.7 million worth of MicroStrategy. For those who aren't aware, MicroStrategy is a company founded by Michael Saylor. It's a business intelligence company. A couple of years ago, they kind of took a very aggressive and I would say pioneering maneuver, which is to put Bitcoin on their balance sheet to the tune of I think they're sitting, I think, is it north of $3 billion? They have quite a bit of
Yeah.
Bitcoin. It's pretty significant. And so all that to say, they own a couple 100,000 Bitcoin. And a lot of people and investors in particular, prior to the ETF even, were saying, oh, we can buy MicroStrategy stock as a sort of pass through or vehicle to gain exposure to Bitcoin without there being an ETF. As of this year, we obviously have an ETF, but still seems like people are eager to purchase the stock and think of it as a proxy to Bitcoin or, a sort of refined type of Bitcoin exposure. Not to get super wonky on the details, but it's pretty interesting because as an operating company that's regulated by the SEC and you're buying a security, not a crypto asset, you're buying stock in the company. They can do interesting things like take, call it intelligent leverage and, use their balance sheet, put it to work, accumulate more Bitcoin and give sort of an accretive model that isn't simply buying and holding Bitcoin in a wallet or an ETF. So I guess the broader point, right, is it's a national pension fund. These are typically some of the most conservative investors, but they're also the ones that have some of the deepest pools of capital and liquidity. When you think of pension funds, right, you think of like CalPERS or, like New York City firefighters or some of the maybe more popularized ones. These folks have a ton of money at their disposal. I think they want to be creative, but they don't make knee-jerk investment decisions. I think it's a co-signing of the asset class and generally Bitcoin-related securities in this circumstances or in this circumstance that is showing that some of the biggest buyers in the world are jumping in. $33 million sounds like a lot. It's probably not relative to their total portfolio size, so they're taking a little appetizer kind of position. But maybe it opens the door for more. And I think it's just on net a benefit to the industry that these folks are at least doing the research necessary to get comfortable. And then the fact that they're actually hitting the buy button is also pretty interesting. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty unique one. I mean, we don't really see too many of these headlines, but I could probably see more of them. What's your take on that, Nick?
Yeah, I think even Matt Hogan at Bitwise even said like, hey, the institutions are coming and they're coming in size, and we've seen some pension funds in the U.S. make an allocation, and like you said, like these are they're not apt to make rash decisions. These are decisions that are very thought out, taking a very nominal allocation. But it's really indicative of just even making that move at all. And I'm not an expert in all of sort of like the international markets, but I think in some cases and in some jurisdictions there isn't the ability to purchase an ETF. So it's going to be really interesting to see if these proxies like MicroStrategy continue to get picked up in various parts of the world, because again, that Bitcoin ETF or a crypto ETF is just something that isn't offered, or they just have no ability to even purchase, in their investment profile. So, yeah, it's really interesting to see how this is going to play out, and the institutions are here, and they continue to come in.
100%. And then I guess final point on that is like, pension funds tend to be the most conservative type of investor. It's almost like the holy grail. Like if you're eligible to be in the portfolio of a pension fund, whether you're a hedge fund, a venture fund, or any other type of financial, services product issuer or whatever, you name it, that's typically like the final boss of like, hey, we can get a couple $100 million of pension fund money. Like we're doing something right. I think, that's kind of co-signing it for the rest of the world, or maybe, they're one of the first that's doing it. but maybe more our followers, right? I think typically in finance generally, and I think crypto is like the perfect kind of case study of this, right? There's a big first mover advantage of getting in first, but there's typically like a lot of second movers that capture most of the upside, but it's kind of like de-risked and demystified by the fact that one of their peers or multiple of their peers are doing this. And so I think that's going to be just kind of the trend of the next 18, 24 months of news. And then like in 2 years we might be reporting on the fact that like, okay, everybody's got a little bit of crypto exposure, and there's going to be something different to talk about. But that's kind of one of those stories that you look at and it's like, oh, it's 33 million bucks, and Bitcoin's $1 trillion asset, and so maybe that doesn't move the needle a ton. But I do think that behind closed doors and in these board meetings, people are saying, oh, okay, if these guys are doing it, maybe we'll want to take a piece or at least investigate it more. And so I just generally like including these types of stories because it does build the sort of foundation for other folks to get comfortable. The last story we have for you here out of the crypto news update is Bitwise, which Nick just alluded to, which is an ETF offer or issuer here in the United States, is expanding into the EU. They just acquired the ETC group, which offers the largest Bitcoin ETP, which is just short for exchange traded product. You can think of it very similarly to an ETF product. And they made an acquisition. They are saying, hey, we want to get involved in not just being here listed in the United States, which is, the sort of king of capital markets globally with the deepest liquidity, with the most participants, like the most trading happens on US exchanges. That being said, they don't want to just take that sort of singular approach and look at just one jurisdiction. They want to go to the EU. There's definitely a lot of money, a lot of institutions, a lot of folks that are interested in crypto out there. And I think this acquisition is just strategic M&A across the sector that's saying like, hey, if we're going to be like a big contender against like a BlackRock or a Fidelity, like some of these household brands, Bitwise, for or to their credit, is a crypto native company. And so I think they're trying to shore up their product suite and say, hey, we're going to make some intelligent acquisitions and go out and try to compete with the big dogs. And I think it's kind of, just my 2 cents in color commentary on it. Like, I think it's kind of intelligent, right? Because even though the US is the most maybe exciting and lucrative capital market or investing market in the world, it's also the most, let's just call it like competition that you can find, right? And so at the same time, maybe this is an intelligent way to go and get more relationships and exposure to new clientele without having to, be in the trenches and spend a ton of money on marketing. And I'm sure they're doing all those things, but it's cool to see that, the EU is getting a little bit of love and seeing a, well-respected issuer move over there and try to service some of those markets. So it's just cool. I think it's right on topic with us talking about international expansions, the globalizing nature of crypto, the fact that it's for everyone everywhere as long as you have an internet connection. And yeah, I think it's just a cool way to cap off the week and to show that people are still doing exciting things during the summer. And we've talked about this a couple of weeks in a row, but like we're getting close to it being everyone back to work and maybe some more exciting headlines, but a lot of groundwork being laid.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like that crypto curiosity is permeating, excuse me, just about everywhere. And I guess to wrap up, I mean, if you're listening to this or you've been listening to this and you are sort of feeling that crypto curiosity and you want to sort of see what this is all about on a deeper level, just wanted to highlight again, we're continuing to offer this $500 in Bitcoin when you get started with the giving block. We've got the link here up on the screen. So just scan that code. You can reach out, talk to myself, talk to my colleagues on my team. Happy to sort of start to demystify any of this and just give you the basic tools to get ready for a year end. And again, we're prepping here. We think it's going to be a really exciting fall. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of fireworks. So we're really excited. So that'll do it for this week's episode. So can't wait to see what's going to happen over the next 7 days. And can't wait to have you back on the episode next week.